This episode has been brought to you by Delete Me.
It's time for Imperial, a new luxury car.
Drive the 1985 Seville.
Continental. It's all you need to know.
While in the late 1970s and the early 80s everyone was doing the hustle, the American car makers were busy doing the bustle. Back. These were rolling bromobiles with all kinds of kitschy neoclassical tricks thrown on them, and the newest trends were throwback-style trunks. But these Bustlebacks disappeared as quickly as they were introduced. Welcome everyone to episode 68 of the Automotive History series, where we dive into the trunk of these and take a look at this short-lived craze. But wait, there's more! I'll also throw in a little buyer's guide for your next Bustleback purchase. How about that? Although in general culture, the late 70s and early 80s is known as the disco era, in American automotive history this period marks the peak of the brougham era. What started as a deluxe version of cars in the late 60s slowly developed in a full-on pseudo-luxury kitschmobiles. One car model after another received a brougham package that included things like waterfall grills, shiny hood ornaments, meaningless badging all around the car, opera windows, vinyl roofs, S-bars and lots of fake wood that would drown in a forest of brownness that was either made or not made from fine Corinthian leather. And why? Well, parallel to the brougham era, the American car industry experienced the malaise era. Cars had to be safer, pollute less, and be more fuel efficient. A very tough nut to crack of the American car industry to tackle all this at once. And in order to focus on these things, the money that was needed for this had to be taken from somewhere else. These were also the years when interior quality degraded, fit and finish was lousy, and some models suffered from numerous problems. If you want to know more, I have an entire hit series that goes deep into the malaise era. It's my personal belief that American car companies tried to cover up these shortcomings, like low power output due to emission restrictions, bad fuel consumption, and cheaper interiors, by diverting attention to luxury, which was often nothing more than just stuffing cars with all kinds of tricks and gimmicks and give it a luxury look by adding lots of cheap-looking fake wood on the inside and neoclassical touches on the outside, including a Bustleback. And now, a quick word from our sponsors. As a content creator, my mailbox gets flooded with all kinds of offers which are almost always scams. How do these scammers reach me? Well, as cautious you and I are online in sharing personal information, data brokers will crawl the internet, find your personal information, and sell it to whoever is interested, like scammers, stalkers, and those that want to steal your identity. Sounds scary, right? Well, that's why I use Delete Me. Delete Me removes your personal data that is floating around on the internet, like your name, address, phone number, and so much more. By removing this data, Delete Me helps you in protecting yourself from risks of harassment on the internet. Simply sign up through joindeleteme.com/EAR or scan the QR code and enjoy a special 20% discount on all consumer plans with the code EAR. When you sign up, Delete Me will remove you from hundreds of data brokers, it monitors sites, and give you a privacy report in 7 days. So, get in control again who uses your personal information and who doesn't by subscribing to the awesome data removal services of Delete Me. Cadillac was the first to do this in 1980 with the second generation of the Seville. The first generation was actually a breeze of fresh air, downsized, sharp, Mercedes shape combined with Rolls Royce stance, a stately, sheer look that got rid of the bloaty bodiness of mid-70s Cadillacs, maximizing interior space, minimizing exterior dimensions. And you'd think that everything was fine and dandy. American car makers finally started to crawl their way out of the dark kitschy hole they were in. But nope, with the second generation Seville, it was back to brougham prison for you. As mentioned, the most radical design feature was the so-called Bustleback, another reference to cars from the good old days, and namely those posh British cars. If Lincoln had a Rolls Royce grille and Chrysler a Jaguar front end, then Cadillac would take inspiration from the styling of custom coach-built Daimlers and Rolls Royces. Cars like the British Daimlers deliberately stayed ultra-conservative throughout production runs, and pretty much retained the pre-war lines until they eventually evolved from old-fashioned to classical, or in vogue again. Namely, the Hooper-bodied Empress models featured the typical Bustleback trunks. Graceful curves meet sharp lines. The Seville was designed by Wayne Cady under supervision of design chief Bill Mitchell. Before the design process of the Seville had begun, similar design themes of the Bustleback and neoclassic styling already wandered around the design studio. For instance, one of the designs was initially an Eldorado proposal, but upper management decided that it could also work on a four-door Seville, which was European-sized after all. It would be more than fitting. The design of the Bustleback Cadillac generated quite some controversy. Think of BMW's current styling theme is not everyone's cup of tea. Contemporary car reviews mentioned that the car looks like it was designed by two styling teams that never spoke to each other. Somehow, the fairly contemporary and modern front end just didn't match with the classical rear-end styling. In my eyes, it does look odd. We have three body lines that come together at the rear bumper. The belt line, that's even more accentuated if you chose a two-tone paint job, the roof line, and the line of the Bustleback trunk, which awkwardly stick out of the body. The horizontal tail lights kinda lie on top of the trunk, giving the rear end a very flat look. I think if these lights were placed vertically on both sides of the trunk, it would add depth to the design. But that wouldn't stop the competition from getting inspired by this idea. The next year, 1981, Chrysler released Imperial. Yeah, that's right, not Chrysler Imperial, just Imperial. To give you a quick rundown, Imperial used to be Chrysler's most luxurious model, until it was decided to make a separate brand out of it to better compete with Cadillac and Lincoln back in the 50s. The brand produced quite a few interesting cars until the 1970s, when it was reduced to being a slightly reworked and up-badged Chrysler. By 1975, the brand was discontinued and Chrysler slowly sank almost into bankruptcy. But by the start of the 80s, Chrysler had hired Lee Iacocca, a man destined to turn the sinking ship around. And as luck would have it, Iacocca was also a sucker for everything gaudy. He managed to dump a Rolls Royce grille on the Lincoln, turning it into a very successful Mark series in the 70s, and was happy to pull the trick once more. So he okayed the project to build a new Halo car, a car that would revitalize the name and fame of Chrysler. And that car was Imperial. And so the brand was more or less back in 1981 with the Imperial no-model name Coupe, a personal luxury car, which was a market segment that was quite hot during the mid-70s but started to fade away by the 1980s. It was also one of Chrysler's most expensive cars ever sold. Anywho, the Imperial was one sharp-looking car, with a lot of hard angles. On the front we find a modern interpretation of the waterfall grille, along with hidden headlights for a clean look. On the rear we find Chrysler's spin on the Bustleback theme. Some say Chrysler was inspired by the Cadillac Seville, but I don't buy it. Mostly because Imperial was released 1 year after the Caddy, and it usually takes about 3 or 4 years to develop and redesign a car. To include a Bustleback simply because you saw it on the latest Cadillacs a few months ago would be a very dramatic last-minute design change. Maybe it was just bound to happen that someone would introduce a Bustleback on an American car, regardless of the company. Whereas GM chose for a rather flat approach, Chrysler went nuts and designed the Bustleback as a huge box that was dumped on the rear end. The full-width horizontal taillights give the trunk somewhat of a floating appearance. If it wasn't for that big box on the back, this Imperial would have been a great 1980s interpretation of the mid-60s Oldsmobile Toronado. It has that rakish rear-end slope as well as the sharp forward-leaning C-pillar angle. And here is my styling suggestion, a quick and dirty Photoshop. What if you remove the Bustleback and let the rear slope down in a continuous line? Like I said, it now looks more like an 80s version of an Olds Toronado, with some Olds Cutlass Fastback thrown in there for good measure. And so, if GM and Chrysler have something new on their hands, Ford can't lag behind. Ford's luxury division Lincoln also struggled in the early 80s after sticking too long to oversized land yachts on one side and offering the wrong kind of compact luxury car on the other. And so after a bit of confusing model shuffling, the mid-sized Lincoln Versailles, which was otherwise a gussied-up Granada, or even Falcon, was replaced by the all-new Continental for 1982, a four-door sedan that was a direct attack on the Seville and, to a lesser extent, Imperial. And yes, this one also came with a Bustleback, and I'm convinced that Lincoln stylists certainly wanted to chase the trend instead of setting one. But not according to a big boss from Ford. The design of the Continental rear end was inspired by a Rolls, whereas the DeVille was inspired by Daimler. Right, if that makes any difference. When you look at it from a distance, the Continental almost looks like a direct one-on-one copy of the Seville. The front end is fairly similar with square dual headlights and a vertical grille. The Continental also uses a similar arched belt line with a dramatic C-pillar shape and curves down much in the same way as the Seville. But when it comes to rear-end styling, Lincoln had found a perfect middle ground. A Bustleback more pronounced than the Caddy, but not so boxy and in your face as the Imperial. The vertical taillights blend nicely with the body moldings, and this, in my mind, is what should have been the rear-end styling of the Cadillac Seville, with the vertical taillights. Anyway, Lincoln also pulled a double whammy, because if the neoclassical Bustleback design wasn't kitsch enough, here, have a fake rear spare tire hump. It should be noted that this was already a Lincoln styling hallmark throughout the 70s, but come on, do you have to force this thing on everything? And so, by the mid-80s, top-level executives, businessmen, and celebrities had a fine choice of 3 Bustlebacks, or 4 if you really wanted the real deal. But which one is the best? Well, get ready for... edsautoreviews proudly presents Battle of the Bustleback Buyers Beware Guide. It's 1983 and you have some money to burn. You want to appear sophisticated and classy, but also a bit daring, sitting comfortably between old money styling and new money gimmicks. You want a Bustleback. Cadillac has got you covered with the Seville. Enter a world of refined luxury and the latest cutting-edge technology like memory seats, fully digital instrument cluster, and heated outside mirrors. If it's not expressive enough for you, you can always personalize it by getting a Gucci edition, or buy a custom-bodied Opera version with a stretch hood and a lack of rear doors and seats. When it comes to power and performance, the Seville is front-wheel drive and powered by a selection of engines. For those seeking for performance on a budget, a diesel engine with 105 horsepower is available. That is outsourced from the Oldsmobile division, because nothing exudes luxury more than the sound of a farm tractor. I can't hear you over my luxury. And what a great engine this is! It allows you to make friends and socialize more at your local garage. See, it's a matter of time before the cylinder head bolts give up and you have a leaking head gasket. But don't you worry, the mechanics will replace the bolt with the exact same units, so that you can experience the same problems time and time again. If you don't like all that fuzz but still value economy, then you're out of luck. The outsourced Buick V6 was just discontinued, but don't worry. A V8 with cylinder deactivation system is also available. The high-technology V8 is a continuation of Cadillac's famous V864 system, better known as the V468 system, giving you all 8 cylinders when you drive around town on low speeds and really want to guzzle the gas, and all its mighty 4-cylinder power out on the highways when you really need it. Power is a relaxed 135 horsepower, and fuel economy is an average of around 19 miles per gallon combined. And you can get all this and so much more for just $22,000. But don't forget Mopar. The all-new Imperial is one of the most luxurious cars ever made by Chrysler. Inside, you find such niceties like a fully digital instrument cluster, an onboard computer system that keeps track of everything. Immerse yourself in an interior that comes with finest Corinthian leather, as selected by our top designer Mark Cross, and a Cartier crystal in the Opera lights. You'll not only get a car, but a complete Mark Cross gift set that includes leather key fob, umbrella, and music cassettes. If that's not enough for you, well then you can always go for the Frank Sinatra Special Edition. Here you get a special badging, a paint color as blue as Sinatra's eyes, and 16 cassettes full of Sinatra's greatest hits. Under the hood, it's nothing but Chrysler's trusty old 318 or 5.2-liter V8 that delivers the power. This year, the engine comes with a regular carburetor, so you don't have to worry about the numerous problems that came with the fuel injection from the previous years. Power is a respectable 140 horsepower, and the fuel economy is an average of around 16 miles per gallon combined. And you can get all this and so much more for just $21,000. But be quick, this is the last year of Imperial's production. But wait, there's more! If neither Cadillac nor Imperial tickles your pickle, then there is always the blue oval. Lincoln presents the Continental for 1983. Outside, you don't need your key to unlock the car. Ford's new keyless entry system allows you to unlock the car by simply pressing the right personal code on the display on the doors. Since Lincoln is a master of special editions, the Continental also comes with 2 designer series, including a Givenchy edition for a rich black look and a Valentino edition for that Italian touch you didn't know you needed in your life. Under the hood, things are straightforward. Only Ford's 5-liter or 302 cubic inch V8 was offered that included fuel injection that actually works. The more budget-conscious buyers had just missed the 3.8-liter V6, but might want to wait until next year when Lincoln introduces a turbocharged diesel engine directly outsourced from BMW. The V8's power is a leisurely 140 horsepower and the fuel economy is an average of around 19 miles per gallon combined. And you can get all this and so much more for just $21,000. Whew, okay, time to turn off my advertising voice and, go back to the review. Here's an overview of the 3 cars and their many specs. Let me know in the comments what you would get and why. For me, it would most likely be the Imperial, but that's because I really like the styling of the car. And let's face it, if you as a car maker are so hung up on these Bustleback trunks, you better offer the largest trunk space available, which this Imperial does by quite a margin. Once again, just pause the video and take a look at this overview and let me know in the comments what you would get. As mentioned before, the Bustleback craze disappeared as soon as it was introduced. The styling only lasted 1 model generation, so as soon as a redesign was up, the Bustlebacks disappeared. All 3 cars never really had a huge effect on the car market. Cadillac sold the most, some 30 to 40,000 Sevilles a year, followed by Lincoln with some 20 to 30,000 Continentals a year, and in 3rd place, Chrysler with only a few thousand Imperials every year. Cadillac facelifted the Seville in 1985, although I don't consider it any better or worse than the Bustleback. The proportion seems a bit off, where the rear wheels are pushed too far back as opposed to the greenhouse. Imperial, although a great car, suffered from numerous problems as caused by the fuel injection. Even Sinatra complained his Imperial stalled on the most random occasions. In the first 2 years, customers could return their cars to the dealers and convert the cars back to regular carburetors for free, but this meant almost everything in the engine bay had to be reworked. Expect to leave your car at the garage for more than a week, as it was rumored that it took more than 50 man-hours to complete the job. Chrysler lost a lot of money on every car that had to be converted. Imperial was discontinued after 1983 with no replacement in sight. Chrysler would limit itself to the fairly conventional K cars, although the Chrysler TC by Maserati could be considered as some sort of spiritual successor. And then there was the Lincoln Continental. Now, to be honest, there wasn't really anything bad with the car, but it wasn't a huge hit either. However, of the 3, it was the longest lasting Bustleback. Lincoln would continue to sell the Continental until 1987, when it was replaced by a far more conventional and aerodynamic design. But there is one car that stretches the Bustleback era, and that's the OG, the Daimler. The Daimler DS420 limousine would carry on the styling as designed in 1968 all the way until 1992, marking the very last year of the Bustleback craze.